Greyhound is an American company whose buses have traveled the United States for over a century. In the past, all of its buses featured a distinctive design with silver corrugated sides and were known far beyond the United States. Greyhound's history begins with Mesaba Transportation Company, MTC, a small transportation company founded in 1914 in Minnesota by 4 Swedish immigrants. The company initially transported miners to local mines, but soon expanded into passenger transportation to nearby cities and towns. By 1918, the company owned 18 buses and had annual revenues of $40,000. In the following years, MTC expanded aggressively through the purchase of smaller bus companies and by 1928 became the nation's largest motor carrier with annual revenues of $6 million. In 1929, the company acquired the Gray Line Worldwide Excursion Company, after which its management changed its name to the Greyhound Corporation and moved its headquarters from Duluth, Minnesota, to Chicago, Illinois. In its early days, Greyhound used a variety of buses, but with the advent of a network of highways, the interstates, the company switched to specialized intercity buses. These buses were custom-built by the Chicago-based Yellow Coach Manufacturing Company and featured a unique sleeve-type engine and a frame chassis with a huge 6,350 mm wheelbase. The engine of the Yellow Coach C-250 bus had no valves. Opening and closing of the intake and exhaust channels were controlled by moving liners with slotted holes inside the cylinders. In those years, such engines were installed in many prestigious cars, Minerva, Panhard Levasseur, Stearns Knight, etc., and were famous for smooth and almost silent operation. However, due to the complicated liner drive, they were not characterized by reliability, so over time all valveless engines were replaced by conventional ones. Nevertheless, this did not prevent Yellow Coach from becoming the main supplier of Greyhound buses, all of which were given original names and their own Greyhound emblems. In 1936, the Greyhound Supercoach, the latest Greyhound bus, was launched on intercity routes. It embodied a number of revolutionary ideas: a rear-mounted engine and a monocoque body with a power frame made of steel and aluminum. But the real sensation was the Supercoach 743, which appeared a year later. It was equipped with a 6-cylinder 2-stroke GM diesel engine and for the first time in the world practice received a ventilation system with air conditioning. Both cars were characterized by unusual rounded design with characteristic horizontal slits on the bumpers, glazed stern, and high sill line. This design was due to the presence of a luggage compartment under the floor in the central part of the body. In the cabin, passenger comfort was provided by comfortable adjustable seats with high backrests and frosted night lights. The 37-seat Supercoach series was very successful, and Greyhound purchased 1.5 thousand of these cars. In 1938, the 743 model was replaced by the 1206, which marked a new era in the history of Greyhound and received a capacious folk name, Silversides. This nickname appeared for a reason. In the late 1930s, the famous industrial designer Raymond Loewy was involved in the creation of Greyhound buses, who designed an original and attractive machine in the Art Deco style. The sides of the bus were decorated with corrugated aluminum panels, and the front end had large horizontal moldings and round headlights. At the rear, the image was complemented by huge engine compartment louvers and an original signal with the inscription "Stop." These design decisions were so successful that buses in a similar style were produced in the US until the mid-1990s. The bus went into production in 1941 and was produced until early 1948, covering about a dozen models, differing in the number of seats, equipment, and engine type. In 1944, yellow coach manufacturing became part of General Motors Corporation and began designing a new mainline bus. At that time, GM was engaged in manufacturing not only automobiles, but also railroad trains. One of such trains, Train of Tomorrow, the concern presented in 1947. Train of Tomorrow, in addition to corrugated sides, had glazed superstructures on the roofs of cars, from where passengers could enjoy the surroundings. This train inspired bus designers to create the next model, called Cinecruiser. It was really a huge mainliner, providing unprecedented comfort for buses. Greyhound Cinecruiser had an unusual 1.5-deck layout. Part of the cabin was on the ground level, and the other part rose above the roof and had front glazing. The serial Cinecruiser was equipped with air conditioning and toilet, and the driver's work was facilitated by power steering. There were 10 seats on the first deck and 33 on the second deck. At the rear, under the passenger compartment, was a gigantic luggage compartment with a volume of 9.7 cubic meters. At the heart of such an impressive machine was a 3-axle chassis with air suspensions and a single driving center axle. Since GM had no suitable diesel engines, the Cinecruiser power plant was composed of two 6-cylinder 2-stroke engines with a total output of 320 horsepower. Their synchronous operation was achieved by a hydraulic clutch, and from it the torque through a single-disc clutch with electromagnetic drive was transmitted to a partially synchronized 3-speed gearbox with a splitter. This solution was a compromise and caused many problems in the future, but at the time of its debut, the Greyhound Cinecruiser was considered to be almost the most perfect coach in the world. The new bus brought significant publicity to Greyhound and spurred interest in domestic tourism. The company ordered a total of 1,000 units from GM, but it soon became clear that the Cinecruiser was a very capricious machine, not corresponding to the traditionally high level of service Greyhound. The combination of two low-power engines did not justify itself. The units had low consistency in operation, were difficult to repair and service. In addition, the Cinecruiser body was not strong enough and had cracks in the area of the rear spars. All these problems created tension between Greyhound and General Motors, and the two firms soon parted ways. In 1958, Greyhound acquired the Canadian company Motor Coach Industries, and all subsequent buses were produced at its facilities. As for the Cinecruisers themselves, almost all of them were rebuilt by the Marmon Harrington Company. She strengthened the body, updated the interior. Instead of the twin-engine power plant, installed an 8-cylinder 318-horsepower Detroit diesel engine, and instead of the old gearbox, for speed, mechanics Spicer. All this reconstruction took several years and cost Greyhound $10 million. The classic vehicles produced by MCI were MC Series buses with 2- and 3-axle chassis and large aluminum bodies with a passenger capacity of 50 people. The most famous in this series was a bus MC6 with automatic transmission Allison, made in an extremely unusual design. It was produced until 1967 and was called Greyhound Supercruiser. In addition to it, the series included simpler vehicles under the names NC7 Freighter and Combo, NC8 AmeriCruiser, NC9 Crusader. By the early 1980s, Greyhound was at the peak of its greatness. It had 3,800 buses in its fleet, which served 60% of all intercity lines in the country. In the following decade, as air transportation grew, Greyhound's influence waned somewhat. The company now owns 1,700 vehicles that carry about 18 million passengers annually. Classic corrugated buses were used until the mid-2000s, And nowadays, the Greyhound fleet is based on three-axle buses from Prevost, a Volvo company.